Hello everyone, welcome back to Decades. For years, Connor Jones has raved about Derbyshire. He's been there, I've been there, but we've never been there together. Well, today, that is about to change. Derbyshire is a beautiful county where the Midlands meet the Northwest, and it's home to large proportions of the Peak District National Park. A beautiful over 500 square mile area of plateaus, hills, valleys, limestone gorges, and whatever other geographical terms you can find on Google. This is where we are today, but more specifically, we are somewhere truly surreal. Welcome to the picturesque, gorgeous village of Castleton. If your idea of heaven is the rustic, rural England, then this is the place to be. And at the heart of Castleton, overlooking the breathtaking landscape, we can find Peveril Castle, a fortress of Norman origin overlooking the Hope Valley, whilst beneath it sits the largest naturally forming cave entrance in the UK, Peak Cavern, also fondly known as the Devil's Arse. So today we're going to be exploring the history of this castle, and in part, this cave. But to get to heaven on earth, we must first travel along a road that can only be described as the opposite. Though in fairness, that's an exaggeration.
So we're now entering Winnett's Pass because I said it's a good view. Let the Fiat 500, there's always a Fiat 500.
Yeah, I figured it's on their side, so I'm letting the Fiat go. At least it's not a BMW behind me. And then it's across the cattle grid. Yep. That's shaken the car right up, hasn't it?
Nope, just crawl down. Just be careful, you might have to pass a few people.
Oh, bloody hell. That is steep. There is steep and then there is that.
It's 20% grade, the sign said.
There's 20% and then there's 20% of me seeing my life flashing before my eyes.
Oh, look. Avoid the sheep.
Like the sheep.
You're best off going to like a stop.
I'm going to try and crawl past the sheep.
Sheep's doing bits.
It's worth it. It's worth the absolute terror of going down it for the view.
Nope.
It's alright, it's just the car running away with itself a little bit. It's worth it for the view. I like how the car's coming up now to do it.
Imagine how hard it'd be to start again on this hill.
I can imagine, very. But there's just enough space usually.
Yeah.
There's just enough space.
If needs be, you could always go on the verge a little bit.
No. Not in my new car. Am I doing that? I might have to with the van though. Fuck.
You see what I mean? It's just gorgeous, isn't it?
It's bloody amazing is what it is. It's just a shame that I had to drive it in complete terror. There's even more to come.
And you're greeted with this spectacular viewage.
I love it. I do love it. I think it's really nice. There's always people walking in there. I've noticed videos where people are doing it as well. Yeah,
it's a nice walk.
But we're more or less done with that now, I presume. Oh, we've just got to wait for the gate to sort of be clear and then jobs are good.
Winnett's Pass.
So it wasn't so bad. But we've arrived now. So that's good.
Go on, you got about a foot, slowly back. Slowly, 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 stop. Professional. I don't see this castle, where is it?
It's up there, Connor.
Taking me up another hill.
With Winnett's Pass now in the rearview mirror, it's time to drag Connor up the hill to Peveril Castle. It's very nice down here. Although I've already seen the obligatory Toyota Prius. Imagine living here and driving a Prius.
Save the world, mate, save the world.
You'd hardly know there was a world to save if you lived here.
Can I eat my cream egg when we get to the top?
Yeah, you can eat your cream egg at the top. Treat yourself.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the funniest bit? Not only is it a hill, Jones, but you might actually have to pay to go up it.
Do you reckon we could just edit it? You know, you get this bit, and it's just my face, so I don't have to walk up.
Right, there's a little model here. No longer need to go up the hill because there's a model of the castle. That's all we need for.
It's alright, we won't be able to get to that bit anyway, the bridge is broken.
Damn. So let's begin with the history before we start receiving angry comments. After the Battle of Hastings in 1066, William the Conqueror, now King of England, embarked on his mission to pacify the rest of England. Along the way, his forces would erect wooden Motte and Bailey fortresses to provide strategical advantage over the surrounding areas. These fortifications' primary function was to quell insurgencies, securing the areas that had already submitted to the power of the king. Peveril began its existence as one of those wooden fortresses, so as you can imagine, the stone keep we see before us didn't exist yet. However, a fortress would be established here at some point between 1066 and the completion of the great survey known as the Domesday Book in 1086. Elevated areas and perches overlooking vast swathes of land were quite popular for the construction of these Norman castles, and that's simply because elevated positions with high visibility provided a tactical advantage. But it doesn't half make them a bugger to walk to. Definitely wouldn't want to trip. Hope Valley was likely chosen due to already proven tactical significance. 2 kilometers to the west you have Mam Tor, which once upon a time functioned as a Bronze Age hill fort, and once upon a time 3 kilometers in the other direction there was a Roman fort. Extra significance could be applied to the valley due to valuable mineral resources that were found here, primarily lead. In fact, Derbyshire has millennia of lead mining history, and the town of Castleton happens to be nearby to the famous Odin mine, the origins of which are unclear, but it's possible that it dates back as far as the Romans themselves. But you get the idea. The construction of a fortress here was a massive advantage in the Normans' bid to pacify the nation. The establishment of Peveril Castle can be attributed to a follower of William the Conqueror, William Peveril. Peveril was rewarded following his support of the Norman conquest, being granted the new castle in Nottingham by the king himself, whilst he undertook subduing the Midlands and northern England. According to the Domesday Book, by 1086 William Peveril had become quite a powerful landowner, whose favour with the king was so great, and details regarding his origins so elusive, an unsubstantiated legend arose that he was in fact the king's bastard son. Peveril had significant land holdings both in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. It's unclear when he founded the castle itself. However, Peveril was one of only 48 castles mentioned in the Domesday Book survey, and it was the only one located in Derbyshire. Many Norman castles would initially be constructed in timber, making them easy to establish and move on. However, many believe that Peveril was designed to be built from stone from the beginning. William Peveril had custody of royal lands such as the district of the Hope Valley as one of them, which is where we are. But despite having his own estates too, he still relied heavily on royal favour to maintain his power. And with that, we've made it to the top of the hill. The rewarding moment. On the subject of Peveril's wealth and power, in the year 1100, the new king Henry I would grant him his own domain in the Peak, meaning the Peak where Peveril Castle stood became an independent lordship under the control of William Peveril. As a result, the castle became an important centre of administration, and the newly formed village of Castleton would benefit the most as the economic centre of the lordship. However, this independent lordship would not survive long. Following William Peveril's death, his lands and titles fell to his son, William Peveril the Younger. During the Anarchy, a civil conflict fought between 1138 and 1153 in England and Normandy. In short, Peveril backed the losing side, and was captured at the Battle of Lincoln in 1141. Which resulted in a massive hit to his fortune. And then in 1153, the future King Henry II believed William Peveril the Younger to be guilty of plundering and treachery, implicating him in a plot to assassinate the 4th Earl of Chester. And in 1155, Henry would confiscate Peveril's estates, including Peveril Castle. Peveril Castle was now back under royal control, and functioned as the administrative centre for the Forest of High Peak, which in medieval times was a large woodland that covered the vast majority of the northwest of Derbyshire and functioned as something of a royal hunting reserve. During his reign, King Henry II would only visit Peveril Castle 3 times. In 1157, he hosted King Malcolm IV of Scotland here. It was during this meeting where he would relent Cumberland and Westmoreland to the English king. He would visit again in 1158 and 1164. According to records of royal expenditure known as the Pipe Rolls, between 1175 and 1177, Henry invested a modest sum in constructing the stone keep we see before us today. The garrison here would also be significantly increased during the revolt of 1173 to 1174.
Beep.
That one out.
Beep. Move.
Jones.
Following Henry II's death in 1189, the throne fell to Richard I, famously known as Richard the Lionheart, who granted the lordship of the peak, including Peveril Castle, to his brother John. However, during the 1190s, whilst Richard was on crusade, John rebelled, so on his return to England, Richard would confiscate the lordship. However, John himself would become king in 1199 following his brother's death, and the Peveril estate would sort of make its way back to the Peveril bloodline. You see, William Peveril the Younger had died in 1155, without a living male heir to maintain a claim to his confiscated lands. All that remained was his daughter Margaret, who had married Robert de Ferrer, the second Earl of Derby. So the Earls of Derby maintained a claim to the Peveril's confiscated land. Fast forward to the reign of King John, William de Ferrer, the 4th Earl of Derby, maintained this claim and paid the king £1,300 for the lordship of the peak. However, the crown would withhold Peveril Castle itself until finally giving the Ferrers these castles in 1216 in order to secure their support, as the country faced yet another rebellion. However, the Castellan at the time, Brian de Lisle, refused to hand over Peveril Castle and another castle, and though both sides' loyalties were to King John, John granted the Ferrers permission to use force to retake their property. It's unlikely that Peveril was ever directly assaulted, however, it's believed Brian de Lisle did indeed negotiate his surrender. Ferrer only possessed the lordship for a short time until King Henry III retook control of the lordship in 1223, and for the remainder of the 13th century, Peveril Castle was maintained by the Crown. Undergoing various renovations, the records are sparse, so it's unclear what and at what time. However, it's believed that by the end of the 13th century, all of the castle's buildings had been completed. The castle was passed around a bit among the royals, but into the 14th century the estate was given to John of Gaunt, the third surviving son of King Edward III, and this is where many attribute the beginning of the castle's decline. During the mid-14th century, John of Gaunt was the richest nobleman in England, and as a result he possessed several castles. Peveril Castle was relatively insignificant to him, and he decided not to maintain it. In fact, later in the 1370s, he gave orders to strip the castle for its lead to reuse it at Pontefract Castle. Administrative functions would be held elsewhere, meaning Peveril had fallen completely from the realm of importance. A survey in the mid-16th century would reveal that Peveril was in a state of disrepair, and as a result, over the decades that followed, it was completely abandoned. Some materials, such as stone, would be removed to be used elsewhere, and at one point it would be used to house livestock, but that was really it for Peveril, at least until the 19th century when the area became a popular tourist attraction. The Duchy of Lancaster would undertake maintenance to ensure that the castle didn't deteriorate further. Interest in the castle itself grew due to the publication of the 1822 Sir Walter Scott novel Peveril of the Peak. In 1932, the castle was placed into the guardianship of the Office of Works before being passed to English Heritage, who have maintained it since 1984. Today, Peveril Castle is open to visitors for a small fee, unless you're an English Heritage member. But it's not the only attraction in Castleton that has historical value. Beneath the hill atop which Peveril Castle is sat, you can find Peak Cavern, the largest naturally forming cavern opening in Britain. Only accessible today to the public via guided tours, Connor and I decided to take one. However, we didn't get much footage because we felt it would be rude to just whip out our cameras.
Well, that isn't alarming in the slightest.
For the most part, Peak Cavern is almost entirely natural, and its original name was the Devil's Arse. And yes, there is also a devil's penis, but it has nothing to do with the cave. According to the tour guide, initially, Devil's Arse was inhabited by bandits deep in the cavern, until they were ousted, but we didn't really get any specifics. But its claim to fame was Peak Cavern was home to some of Britain's last troglodytes, a word of Latin origin that roughly translates to those who dwell in caves. As up until the early 20th century, the cave's entrance was filled with little huts occupied by people who made a living rope making. It was also a popular tourist attraction for wealthy people during the Victorian times, even having a visit from Queen Victoria herself. It's a truly fascinating natural formation, and if you like hearing about legends of the devil, it's certainly a place to visit. We don't want to get too deep into what we learned because that would devalue the tour itself. So if you wish to learn more about Peak Cavern, you will need to penetrate the Devil's Arse yourself. And yes, before you ask, my twisted sense of humour either made or ruined the tour guide's day. He was actually crying. It wasn't appropriate. Castleton is a fascinating town. If you're a history buff, this picturesque, idyllic village in rural Derbyshire is an absolute treasure trove. Coming here and soaking in the rich history of Peveril Castle and the fascinating experience that is the Devil's Arse has been an amazing day out. And yes, feel free to giggle at that. We at Decades simply cannot recommend this place enough. It's breathtaking. But of course, after feeding the ducks the Connor Jones way, it's time to get on the road. Thank you all for watching this video. We really hope that you've enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be awesome. And hopefully no ducks were harmed in the making of this video. But with any luck, we'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care and goodbye.